And then you can text me an update when it's done, because I might email swing by.
No, sir, you're good.
There he is.
Thanks, no, you know what?
Camping and mountain biking with girls.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the Salem Township Planning Commission meeting of June 17th, 2019. We will call to order at 7:30 and we will begin by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, please.
Mark Kahn.
Here.
Darrell Lewandowski.
Here.
TJ McLaughlin.
Here.
Pam Lowe.
Here.
Bruce Reed here. Bob Gristle.
Here.
Dan Gary.
Here.
All present.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda for June 17th, 2019 as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? The agenda passes. Okay. We have a full house today. That's a good thing. I would like to start off by saying, before we get to the public comment, we are going to have Paul do a review, a review and overview, and then we're going to have the applicant do a brief overview. So if you would like to save any comments that are pertaining to our old business items here, the Kalo wetland permit and Kalo preliminary site plan, you might find answers in those presentations. You're welcome to save those comments until the second public comment. If you wish to address the Planning Commission during the public comment, please wait to be recognized. And due to the number of people and the amount of information that we have here today, we're going to ask that once you're recognized, please come to the microphone and state your name. And we would appreciate it if we could hear where you lived. So are you in our community? It gives us a better perception of who's saying what, who's impacted in regards to the issues. And you'll have up to 3 minutes. Our secretary, Mr. Reeves, he will give you a warning sign when you're starting to get close to the 3 minutes. Also be mindful that out in the public, if you're not recognized, speaking without being recognized interrupts others and can be distracting for those of us trying to listen, so. That's it. So, we will start with public comment.
If you could clarify something you said, if you wouldn't mind. You said that we'll have the opportunity to speak during the public comment. Do you mean during the public hearing portion of this meeting? Is this a...
No, there are two public comments on the agenda.
Yes.
The one we're at right now, and then there's one that's at the end.
Well, we haven't, my question then is, this is not a continuation of the public hearing. That was closed at the last meeting.
Correct.
So we have an opportunity, obviously there's a lot of interest in this issue. In addition to this first public comment, will we have the opportunity to speak to the KALO issue prior to the Planning Commission's vote on the issue?
No. So,
That's what was confusing.
sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Well then,
Yes.
I
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
have a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that clarification. Protecting our rural character is the cornerstone of the township's master plan. A key element to accomplish this goal that our master plan speaks in great length about is the importance of protecting our township's natural features, such as our woodlands and wetlands. Therefore, only in circumstances of significant public benefit should wetland mitigation be considered, not the interest of a commercial business in order to grow their company and increase profits. Sound planning principles require that property owners are allowed a reasonable use to develop their property, not the greatest use. The applicant has clearly demonstrated that he has been provided a more than reasonable use for his property. The Planning Commission needs to consider the consequences of establishing a precedent that could be impossible to defend against in the future. In closing, I'm asking the Planning Commission to stay consistent with the master plan's goals and objectives, to preserve our natural features, and deny the applicant's request for wetland mitigation. The Planning Commission should only consider this mitigation request if they can negotiate a significant benefit to the health, safety, and welfare of Salem residents, especially those who live in close proximity. Residents should have a voice in any decisions and discussions regarding this matter. Thank you.
I'll get up, I don't mind. Marie Sherry, 7801 Salem Road. I was here at the last public hearing. We spoke on the wetland, and I spoke against giving them the permit because I didn't at the time believe that there was public interest in giving that wetland permit out, and I still don't think there is. I think the plans that they've presented, I mean, for what they are, look good, but I still don't see a public interest in granting that permit. But I kind of wanted to speak really to the second part of your meeting tonight because I already spoke to the first part. Looking at your agenda or looking at your packet, there was some pretty big numbers thrown around if they're going to do this wetland mitigation and create the new wetlands and purchase the property in hundreds of thousands of dollars, which indicates to me that this is a company that, if they get this expansion, doesn't plan to go anywhere probably for the rest of my life. As we know, there's a lot of noise and problems like that in the area. I appreciated the planner and Mr. Whitaker meeting with me over this to kind of go over the thoughts that the township had on it and how things were granted and how they got in there. To give you a little bit of an idea, I've been in local government for 25 years. I have a master's degree in public administration and urban planning. So I don't do urban planning as my job, but I know my way around the zoning ordinance. And the zoning ordinance is silent for this kind of operation. The township, my understanding, has approved it as a MRF, material recovery facility. There's no definition in there for that. So the zoning ordinance says if there's no definition, then it's the commonly used, understanding what that term is. And MRFs are usually for recycling of municipal solid waste into things that people can, that they can sell to remake something. To me, that's clearly not what this is. If you look in the zoning ordinance, and I'll give you this, I'm not gonna read it out, you guys know what the zoning ordinance says. But if you look in there, there's several uses in the industrial area that covers similar types of activities. One of them is junkyards, and no, this is not a car junkyard, but if you look at the zoning ordinance, it talks about dismantling or recycling facilities. It talks about where waste, used, or secondhand material is bought, sold, exchanged, stored, baled, et cetera, processed. The original approval for the MRF only goes to the standards of outdoor storage. This is clearly not an outdoor storage situation. This is clearly a heavy industrial recycling, processing type of use. So I just would like to request the Planning Commission, when you're looking at this conditional, or at this expansion, that you look at parts of the zone, yes? Oh, okay. That you look at parts of the zoning ordinance that cover this kind of heavy use and this kind of noise, hours limitations, screening, heavier screening, especially hours limitation. You must please limit their hours. No Sundays, no holidays, no 24 hours, no 5 a.m., no 7 p.m. I mean, this is where we live, and living with that 24/7 last summer was miserable. It's miserable. Thank you.
Yes.
Hundred Burline, 7811 Salem Road. And I still go back to the very first thing it says about that general industrial area, you know, where it talks about incompatible uses. You know, the purpose of these regulations is to permit development of industrial operations while protecting and promoting rural, residential, and commercial properties. You know, it's that simple. You know, I live over here, and starting 5, 6 in the morning, you get the beep, beep, beeps of them loaders and the tailgates. You know, they had the first agreement that they signed, they were gonna have the lift gates on by July of 2017. It still hasn't happened, so they're not living up to that. They're not living up to the dust control. They're tracking that stuff out into our road every day. It's a nuisance. You know, the Michigan DEQ said they're in violation of Rule 901B. It was addressed by saying we're gonna pave the road. Well, that's not gonna fix it. The trucks are dragging it out onto the road daily. You know, that's one thing, and the other thing is that DEQ, you know, they base their recommendation, their tentative recommendation on, you know, on them moving that concrete crusher back to where they're gonna fill that in. Well, if they're not gonna do that anymore, that takes away all the benefit. All right.
We're just going to get started. Actually, Paul will do his brief overview.
This is for the K-level wetland permits, application number 19-001. And we have a review from our office dated June 11th, 2019. And this is specific to the wetland permit itself. You also have in front of you the preliminary site plan on the agenda this evening. That's the next agenda item, so to the extent that I cover a little bit of that in this first report, I can certainly go back when we get to that agenda item and answer questions there, but I will cover some of that here. So first of all, just to bring everybody up to speed, I know that you all discussed this before, but in case there are folks here who have not heard this before, I'll give a brief overview of what the general application is for. This is a 36-acre site for a parcel in a general industrial district. There's an existing facility, and they're looking for an expansion. It's used for truck parking, delivery and storage of used road and site construction materials. In addition to storing these materials, the operations include the processing of concrete with a concrete crusher. The development basically consists of about 18.6 acres of the site, and the proposal includes the filling of 2.36 acres of what is considered regulated wetland based on both the Township wetland ordinance as well as EGLE, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and I got it, energy. I got the whole thing. Because this is regulated by the township ordinance, they are required a wetland permit. It's also required to get a eagle permit as well. So I'm going to go through what they're proposing. The wetland that meets the requirements of the ordinance is because they're within 500 feet of the Johnson Creek. As I said, they will be required to get a permit from the state. It's our understanding that the state is currently reviewing the permit, but we have not gotten feedback on their disposition at this point. They were issued a draft permit from the state based on their previous mitigation proposal, which included buying of wetland bank credits within a wetland bank. But as you all remember from the previous meeting, that wetland bank is outside of the watershed, and the township ordinance suggests that the first and best option is to be on site, the second is to be within the same creek shed in the same area, then the same watershed, and the last resort would be to buy credits in another watershed. So the applicant has explored a new possibility. They submitted their conceptual proposal that we have reviewed. That's what this review is based on. Again, we're awaiting the information from the state, but it does require both the township to issue a permit as well as the state to issue a permit. So generally, the area that would be maintained would be the wetlands that exist between the site and the Johnson Creek, so that does provide a good buffer to the creek. Predominantly the area that's being filled is going to be used for the new stormwater facility, and then the area beyond that would be the expansion area for the parking, stockpiling, and operations at the site. So the wetland review criteria is outlined in section 4.23 of the Township Wetland Ordinance. And the Planning Commission shall determine whether the activity of disrupting the wetlands is in the public interest and the benefit which is reasonable may be expected to occur from the proposal shall be balanced against the reasonable foreseeable determinant of the activities to the member of the public. And so we go through each of these findings that are listed in the wetland ordinance, and I will indicate those findings and just briefly indicate what we are suggesting our findings from. Carlisle, obviously, you can, we expect you to review those, comment on those, and discuss those, and we're happy to try to answer any questions that you might have about that. So number one, the relative extent of the public and private need for the proposed activity. We indicate that the proposed activity will fulfill a private need for the company so that their yard can be expanded to increase parking, provide more space for truck navigation, increasing increasing employee safety, increasing material storage, and to accommodate a truck wheel washer. The company has been able to establish and grow a business by recycling concrete materials and construction materials. While these activities make a profit for the company, it also provides employment and a market for unwanted materials that would otherwise be disposed of in the landfill. Number two, the availability of feasible and prudent alternative locations and methods to accomplish the expected benefit from the activity. So is it reasonable for the company to expand this operation at its current location? In their initial impact statement, I think you all remember from the initial submittal, they described their extensive search within the township and other areas to find another suitable location. And as they described in that initial narrative, they said they kept coming back to this spot as the most prudent and feasible alternative that they identified. And we suggest that in order to find appropriately, that you take a look at that and make that determination as well. The extent and presence of a beneficial and or detrimental effects the proposed activity may have on the public and private uses to which the area is suited, including the benefits the wetland provide. As we mentioned earlier, the expansion of the area into the wetland will provide a benefit to the company's operations. In our opinion, the most significant benefit of these wetlands is to provide a buffer between the current use and the water quality of the Johnson Creek. The creek is stated to be a designated trout stream, meaning it's groundwater fed. The water is relatively clear and free of sediment, and the banks are shaded to keep the water cool. These characteristics make it appropriate habitat for trout. It is the only designated trout stream in the Rouge River watershed. Removing the adjacent wetlands could have a negative impact on the water quality in the stream. However, the adjacent wetlands are not currently that quite high quality, and the plant material in the wetland that does the work for protecting the water in the stream or lake. And so we have the following recommendations. Because this is a cold water stream, if the wetlands are partially filled, we wonder about the groundwater recharge. As I mentioned before, the stormwater facilities are going to be expanded and upgraded for this site. Those are going into that area where the fill is taking place. These will be detention facilities, so it will store the water during heavy rain events and then release it back into the system, as opposed to a retention facility which was previously proposed. So this will end up being a dry basin. I guess we would ask the applicant to indicate what they think the groundwater recharge from that activity will be. The wetlands, the stormwater facility is proposed to go right up to the edge of that basin. Our ordinance suggests that there should be a 50-foot buffer and at a minimum a 25-foot buffer to wetlands. So our concern is that by constructing the banks of the stormwater facility right up to the edge, there will be disturbance into the wetlands. So what we're suggesting is that that buffer should be maintained and push that stormwater facility back so that at the edge of construction, the area that will be disturbed would be that buffer. They can reseed that and then not touch the protected areas that won't be disturbed. There's also the suggestion that there could be some invasive species removal within those existing wetlands to make what will remain a higher quality. And it's our understanding that that area is going to be placed into a long-term conservation easement. So that is also a positive aspect of this proposal. Number 4, the probable impact of each proposal in relation to the cumulative effect created by other existing anticipated activities in the watershed. We note that given the small size of the wetland impact being proposed in the mitigation plan, we don't consider the project to have any impacts on the watershed as a whole. Number 5, the probable impacts and recognized historic, cultural, scenic, ecological, or recreational value on public health and fish or wildlife. The comment is, if invasive species were removed and native plants were installed to improve the quality of the remaining wetland area, and the proposed wetland mitigation plan was implemented, we don't anticipate the project to have any impact on recognized wetland value, particularly the stream's ability to support trout. Number 6, the size and quality of the protected wetland being considered. The wetland impacts from the proposed are relatively small and the quality somewhat poor. Number 7, the amount and quality of remaining wetland in the area. We refer back to our previous comment. The proximity to any waterway, obviously we've noted that this is within 500 feet of the Johnson Creek. If the improvements recommended in criteria 3 above are made in addition to the proposed mitigation, we don't think the expansion will have a negative impact on the Johnson Creek. Number 9, the economic value, both public and private, of the proposed land changes to the general area. This information has not been provided. Number 10 is the necessity for the project proposed. We've gone over that already as well. And then finally, number 11, the wetland use permit shall not be granted unless it is shown that A, an unreasonable disruption will not result in unreasonable disruption will not result to aquatic resources. The proposed activity is primarily dependent on being located in the wetland, and C, the feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist. So as we've stated earlier, we consider it reasonable that the business wants to expand their operations in the current location. This decision is further explained by the applicant's description of its efforts to find alternative locations. The business expansion cannot occur anywhere else on the site, given the entire property is already developed and that no other open space is available. And so we suggest again that you determine that you go through each of these findings and make those determinations. So we do have a couple of suggestions in this report, including obviously the necessity for the permit from the DEQ, the suggestion that the stormwater facilities be moved farther from the edge of the protected wetlands. We think that the proposed mitigation within the creek shed, while our wetland expert who did the review here understands that banks typically have a higher success rate because they are continually monitored. The mitigation area would be required to be monitored for 5 years after the mitigation was installed and approved. But we do recognize that the consultants who are working on this have a high success rate, so we expect that at least the mitigation itself and the 5-year mitigation monitoring period would prove to be successful. We think that there may be an opportunity for this to be then potentially donated or an easement placed over this where a local land conservancy could take over the maintenance of this particular property. So that's something that we would suggest might be a good opportunity to have happen here, so that some other group can continue to monitor and make sure they're removing invasive species. We've had some conversations with the Friends of the Rouge River, who recognize the benefit of this Johnson Creek tributary. So a group like that may be possible. So those are things that we would suggest you might consider. So that essentially concludes the report. Sorry I went through each of those findings so extensively, but wanted to make sure that you were able to see our recommendations there. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have, or after you've heard from the applicant, if you want to ask any questions. Thank you.
Paul, did you say that it's a 50-foot buffer? Is that the ordinance?
25 foot is the minimum.
Mr. Phelan, would you or crew like to do an overview? Yes,
Sure.
yeah.
Not sure how to place this so everybody can see it, but it's for best. So as Paul suggested, we currently have a draft permit from DEQ called Eagle. We've submitted to them our wetland mitigation plans in response to public comments from the last time we got together. Tony put a purchase agreement together for the Pearl Street property, which is located at 7880 Main Street. It's about 15 acres right here in Salem Township, immediately downstream from Kalo's site, which is here. So clearly within the same watershed. DEQ, Eagle is reviewing those plans, and they will get back to us as soon as they can to determine whether or not they also find this to be an acceptable wetland mitigation location. As Paul said, we are proposing to impact 2.36 acres of emergent and scrub shrub wetland at the Kalo facility. And per DEQ requirements and township requirements, we are building more wetland than we are impacting. So we are proposing to mitigate by creating from upland 3.55 acres of wetland. This graphic shows you Johnson Creek as it flows through the property. The green areas are existing wetlands, so we are planning just to expand that existing wetland and create more on both sides of it, so giving it additional buffer capacity. It'll provide that flood protection that some of the residents were concerned about the last time we got together. We will be monitoring it for a minimum of 5 years. Per DEQ requirement, once we build wetland, it has to work. They will not let us walk away. It is not functioning clearly as a good, healthy, protected wetland. In response to some of the comments that Carlisle Wortman had in the recent letter, one of which was doing additional invasive species work on the wetland to remain at the Carroll facility. Just to orient you, so this is Kalo's existing operation. In green is the wetland, Johnson Creek is the blue line. This is the wetland that we're proposing to impact as part of this wetland permit application. All of this will be remaining wetland and upland buffer. It will be placed in a conservation easement. The DEQ is requiring us as part of their permit to monitor the remaining wetland for the next 5 years. This year they're requiring us to go out and do a baseline assessment, so we have to evaluate what species of plants are currently there, what are the dominant plants, how much, what the percentage of invasive species are in contrast to the native species, and then document that in a report that they have to approve. So that's our baseline condition, and then 3 years from now, after Kalo does his improvements, we have to go back out and do another monitoring event where we do the same evaluation and determine if there's any impacts to the existing wetland that remains at the Kalo facility. So we go back and do the same assessment, look for invasive species, what percentage, are there additional changes to the wetland from a lack of hydrology, too much hydrology, all of those kind of changes. If there are any changes, the permit requires us, if they are negative changes, if somehow we have inadvertently harmed the remaining existing wetland on the Kalo facility, we will have to do corrective actions to improve the situation, making sure that this remaining wetland stays in a good, healthy condition. Our assessment back when we did the wetland delineation was that there were some invasives there already. That's a pretty typical condition of wetlands in southeastern Michigan. I don't think it's any more than you would find in most wetlands in this area. We will continue to monitor that. If they are increasing in number because of our impact somehow, we will probably be required by the DEQ to address that then. So we're asking, even though I think the recommendation from Carlisle Wortman is a reasonable condition, in this case, I don't think we can do it because the DEQ is already requiring us to do activities that are going to protect the wetland. I don't want to start dinking with this wetland as part of the local requirements. That may throw us off what the state is going to require us to do for monitoring that wetland and making sure we're not harming it. So we're asking that you let the DEQ handle that. We would also be willing to provide all the information that we do for the DEQ's permit to you, so that you folks can review it and make sure that that wetland is not being managed. Any questions for that? All right, so then I'd like to talk about moving the wetland basin 25 feet. As part of our last submittal, you guys can see this at all. We added additional protection, so this shows you what we're proposing to do. This is the existing wetland that will remain. The wetland that's impacted goes off here. This is our new detention basin. We purposely placed it adjacent to the remaining wetland so that it's buffered from additional site activities. What we currently have proposed to protect the wetland is a split rail fence, 15 feet of upland buffer planted to native species, and then we have the detention basin. Sorry, we also have signage showing that this is a protected area, that equipment can't go into there. We have the detention facilities itself, and then we're already showing a 20-foot wide, 25-foot wide buffer along the existing wetland to remain. It's a minimum of 25 feet. This is upland, so you can see in some areas that it's actually, there's even more buffering capacity to the remaining wetland. That 25 feet is going to be planted to native species, which was suggested. I think the only difference is that it is the very edge of the detention basin, so it will be regraded, but then planted to native species. And that'll protect, I think we're already doing what's being required by buffering the wetland, keeping it protected from equipment. Bill and Tony might be able to talk about if any maintenance activities need to go on after everything is constructed, but our intentions would be that we would never, be driving equipment back along that slope. Any maintenance activities could be done either from the existing buffer or along the site boundary itself. We would never be getting back towards the wetland. The DEQ permit will not allow us to drive in the wetland. It's going to be part of conservation easement. We can't technically even, go back there with any equipment at all, other than just walking backwards to not monitoring. So we feel that it's already protected, it's already being buffered, and that an additional 25 feet pushes us too far into the area that we need, that has caused this whole permit application to be applied for again. I think those are the two main questions to be addressed. Anything else I can answer for you?
So you said you already have the 15-foot.
Yep, so this is the active site. We have, so I'll just go through it really quickly because I know I talked about a lot of different things. So there's a split rail fence along the entire active boundary, 15 feet of restored upland, conservation easement signage to make sure everybody knows that this is a protected area. And then we have the basin itself, and on the back slope, we have a 25-foot wetland buffer. All of this will be ceded to native plant species. It's intended to be a dry basin. There was also a concern about groundwater seepage and that hydrology being maintained to the remaining wetland. Because it's a dry basin, all of this groundwater seepage will remain unimpacted. The wetland that we are impacting is here. Any groundwater seepage that would come from that area will enter the dry basin, and because it's dry, it's meant to continually release water to the wetland in two different locations, therefore maintaining the hydrology from its pre-existing condition to post-development.
I have a question, Paul. So does that meet our ordinance, 1, and 2, does that protect against kind of maybe more severe Mother Nature type incidents with rain or whatnot? Is that, I mean, it keeps the equipment out of there, but for the flow?
So the stormwater facility will be designed such that it will take any storm events and hold those and release them slowly into the natural area. So there are 2 points.
2 points, correct.
2 points of discharge. So that will, maintain the hydrology for the wetland, but it will also protect against flooding situations. So these things are designed to take that stormwater event when it comes really hard and fast and hold it and then slowly release it. The concern, I think the proposed area, once established with the native grasses, does satisfy that 25-foot buffer requirement. What our reviewer was concerned about is during construction of that facility, the equipment disturbing that. So there's basically the edge of the back slope of that pond will be right up against where the existing wetland area is, or the area to be protected. So that was the concern, and
I'm thinking that with the silt fence that will be required along that active wetland edge, that should be enough to keep the contractors out there in construction of the DC.
Well, I think they're not going to be allowed. I mean,
it's
a violation of the permit. This is what we're permitted to do. We're not permitted to go beyond basically that shaded area. And the conservation easement is going to be in place before he puts the shovel in the ground. Because his permit is not going to be valid until we have the conservation easement in place and our financial assurance in place if we go through with the wetland mitigation, the creation. So that's why it's a draft permit from DEQ. It's draft because we don't have those pieces in place yet. So that is the limit. This is the construction limit right there. So
could you point out that one?
the gray, basically.
The gray is the basin, so this is the wetland edge, has the
Okay,
symbol.
just making sure we're talking about the same thing. That's
There'll
as
be-
far as the machine can go.
Yes.
That's right. There'll be a silt fence there to demarcate it, there'll be signage, there'll be,
They're not expecting you to hand dig the retention ponds.
hopefully not.
How long of an area is there, the shaded area?
The acreage is on here. It's 1.76 acres. And the bottom of the base, so we have two proposed seed mixes. We have the slope stabilization, which is for the dark area. These are all native to Michigan. And then we have a stormwater mix that can handle the flashiness both in the sediments that might be in it, as well as the amount of water that's coming in. So that's what we have proposed for the bottom of the basin.
It looks like it's about 500.
Okay.
On the whole, that left edge is, well, that left edge is 800, so you got to be over 8.
So sorry to keep going
Yeah,
back and
you
forth.
might-
This one here is 800,
Yeah.
so that's got to be more
And
than
not
that.
all of it's
So that-
wetlands, this area here is upland,
That
as
area
is
is-
that.
So Paul, it meets our requirements, standards.
That 25-foot buffer, once established, will, again, the concern is that the
It's
construction.
just during construction.
So the silt fence is obviously the delimitation of where they can go. Maybe construction fence as well, because I don't know. I guess our concern,
Instead of
our
split
experience
rail.
is that, no, the split rail. The split rail's on the outside to keep permanent operations from going into the
Okay.
15-foot stormwater buffer. The 25-foot buffer is supposed to be an additional buffer around the wetland bank. So once they have it established, it will function, but the concern is during construction. So we wouldn't have them put a split rail fence in there because nothing will be back there eventually.
Oh, no, I meant, no, I'm good.
Yeah, but during construction, maybe construction fence so that it's more visible, because just in our experience, silt fence is there, it gets trampled over, that kind of
I think that's acceptable.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. You're good? Okay. Yes, please.
I have to ask a question. How did Johnson Creek get designated as a trout stream when it was not a planned trout stream? And Northville had an issue of overflow allowing the trout to get out of their weirs and causing it to get into Johnson Creek. I mean, is that, now the state has to recognize that? Do we have to still recognize that when that's an issue and it was not a planned one?
I hope you're not asking me.
So I think the designation as a trout stream is based on certain criteria. The cold water, the shaded banks, I think, are things that lead to it. The way it became a trout stream, I can't speak to. But, you know, there are trout streams that are natural trout streams that are designated as such. And so it's just a recognition that it's a high-quality cold water stream that provides a habitat for the trout. In addition to that, that means that it's a high-quality stream. That means it's a good tributary to the Rouge River. And so that's why we think that it's important to protect it. So the circumstances that surrounded how it got there aren't as important as the fact that it meets the criteria now.
Now, yes,
So if they make those changes to the wetland areas that they have, and they mitigate the other wetland areas, will the general quality of the protection of the wetlands be the same, better?
So we'll end up with a net addition to the amount of wetland in this immediate vicinity because they have to mitigate at 1.5 of what they're taking out. So they're mitigating 3.5 acres with a 2.3 impact. So the presumption is that the assessment that I understand is that the existing wetlands are not as high quality. Folks that we talked to who are the Friends of the Rouge suggested to us that having additional stormwater facilities here would be a benefit because the existing ones probably don't function as well as what will be built. There were some questions last time about the monitoring of the stormwater facilities. It would be the applicant's responsibility. We're going to suggest during final site plan approval that we create a development agreement. The development agreement would include that mitigation, or excuse me, the maintenance plan for the stormwater facility. So they would be responsible each year to look at that and report back to us that those standpipes, the release structures, all those things are functioning appropriately. So that's going to be an improvement to the area. As I said, you'll have a net increase in the total wetlands in the immediate vicinity. Through that 5-year monitoring period, they're going to be responsible to maintain those wetlands, make sure they're functioning appropriately, and removing invasives, etc. So ultimately, it sounds like it's a benefit from stormwater, water quality, etc. for the creek shed.
Yeah, I just wondered, in your opinion, if a protective factor of the creek shed would
We believe that it will be better.
improved?
We believe that it will be improved, and again, as they noted, they have to put an easement over the existing wetlands that are going to be maintained. Our suggestion is that we discuss what will happen with the created mitigation wetlands in terms of the long term, and is there an opportunity to place an easement there and provide that to some other group that might take over the maintenance. Because we believe that there are folks who would be committed to doing that, different land conservancies or others.
And just to what Paul said, just to add to that, we spoke with a guy from the Friends of the Rouge, and he said that what they're proposing here in the plan for the dry basin was such a significant improvement that it would really help. It would be definitely better than what is there now, and then he didn't really have anything negative to say about it. He didn't have anything negative to say about it.
So Paul, basically the wetlands that are going to be filled in are not premium wetlands because of the invasive species. Kalo's going to plant a lot of native plants. Looks like the existing and the new mitigated ones, and it should be a win-win for the wetlands, correct?
It appears that that would be the case, yes. The native plants that you're talking about that they would be planting would be along the buffer, along the proposed stormwater facilities, and then they would have to do wetland planting in the mitigation area as well.
Actually, the new plan will result in increased oversight. Will it not? I think I read that in the materials. With the old existing site and the new site, that will kind of reset the oversight with the DEQ, and they will kind of, it will result in a longer period with even the oversight.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no oversight now, so as Diane explained a moment ago, it sounds like they're responsible to do a baseline study on the existing site that they're granting the easement to DEQ, Eagle, and then obviously they'll have to have the 5-year monitoring plan on the mitigation site as well.
And so then, I guess my question is, for after beyond the 5 years, what was your recommendation again? What did you plan to do with it?
With the mitigation property,
Yes.
it's open to negotiation, I believe.
What was that, Dan?
So we're going to negotiate.
It's open to negotiation.
I just had one question. I heard you say 3 years, you're supposed to look at it again. Paul keeps saying 5 years, so can you clarify the 3-5?
Yes, as part of the DEQ permit, we will have to monitor the mitigation wetland for 5 years.
Okay,
So
so that's
every
fine.
year, several times a year, we have to go out and look at hydrology, plants, et cetera, document invasive species, write a report to the DEQ, they review it. At the end of, there may be midterm corrective actions if the DEQ sees something in the mitigation area they don't like. We usually control invasive species in the mitigation area throughout the whole 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, the DEQ meets us on site. We have to delineate the wetlands to make sure that we promise that we built 3.55 acres of wetland, and that's what we have gotten at the very least. And they will review that information, final monitoring report, the exact acreage that was built, before they'll sign off on the mitigation area. The 3 years, that was part of monitoring the existing remaining wetlands on the Kalo trucking facility proper. So these wetlands that will remain buffering Johnson Creek terminal property, we will be looking at those this year to document the exact condition that the wetland is in pre-development. And then in 3 years, we will go back, do the same assessment to ensure that there aren't any additional changes. More invasive species coverage, hydrological changes, anything that's going to impact the wetlands and possibly the Johnson Creek itself. If they are seeing, as a result of our reporting, negative impacts, they will require corrective actions.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Just a technical question about the wetlands that you're wanting to fill in. Do any of those hold water all year long? Or is that more of a transitioned wetland?
It's more of a transition.
That doesn't hold water anymore?
Right, so
About the fish.
this is the wetland that's going to be impacted. It is part scrub shrub, part emergent. The emergent areas hold water a little bit longer. But typically most of this area will dry out by July, August, early September. There's probably some groundwater that's coming in through there. We'll capture that as part of our stormwater dry basin, so that water will still make its way to the rest of the wetland in Johnson Creek.
One more question for, I guess, Paul. Our wetland ordinance, from what I understand from Ed, is exactly the same, or Ed maybe is exactly the same as the state?
It's almost for the criteria for determining whether or not the application is for a public purpose. The criteria and standards are almost identical both in the state statute and our wetlands ordinance.
And so that just applies to filling in of the wetlands. It has nothing to do with the mitigation. Correct.
Correct. And those were the findings that I generally went over for you.
Yep. I just want to make sure where the Salem Township criteria stood in regards to what we're waiting on. So, well, actually not what we're waiting on. It's already been approved through the draft.
That's correct. So it's already been approved through the draft. What the DEQ is now considering is
the
the
mitigation.
updated mitigation plan. Correct.
So in other words, the MDEQ, now Eagle, has already determined that the activity is for the benefit of a public purpose, because they've considered the activity that's going to be taking place and the filling into the wetlands. The secondary question to me, in my opinion, is now how is that going to be mitigated? Is it going to be purchasing mitigation credits with the Raisin River watershed, or is it going to be with the adjacent property in Pearl Street, which the township would prefer, obviously, to keep it in the watershed?
Right. So just to summarize, these wetlands that are being filled in are already approved per state standards. So that's already approved. And our Salem criteria is the same as that. I think everything is satisfied. So in regards to 5 criteria, yeah, did you guys say that you were addressing the arsenic testing?
We are, we're in the
Okay.
process of that right now.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have any questions in regards to the wetland permit? Okay.
Okay, motion is in order, right?
The motion is in order to the extent that if you're moving forward with a approval, I would suggest that either you reference the findings that we have in our report or.
I was going to, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the Kalo Wetland Permit 19-001 in accordance with all of the recommendations detailed in the Carlisle-Wortman report. More details, do you think, Eddie? Is that all encompassing?
So I guess what I was suggesting is that you base it on those findings, the suggested findings, and then if you felt you needed to add the extra comment about the construction fence.
Okay.
And then I don't know that there are any outstanding, if you don't believe that there are any outstanding comments in the report, then you're really just basing it on the findings in the report. Because if you accept the explanation of the 25-foot buffer, and if you accept the on-site, or the remaining wetland monitoring that they're already doing for the DEQ, as opposed to removing the invasive species, you're really just basing it on the findings that were identified there.
Sure.
And then it wouldn't be, so we have some.
So not on the recommendation?
Not on the recommendations, right, on the findings, is what my suggestion was.
So could we ask that you have your motion say you approve what we propose based upon the findings of Paul's letter?
Right, and we also want to include,
Construction fence.
yeah, the construction fence. Let me just write this down for a minute. So that part is become findings. Start over here, and then go that way. So,
Well, let's start off.
yes, that would be, the buffer was addressed. And if people approve with letting DEQ handle the mitigation of the plants, as they probably know what it was. This, well, it's just the findings.
Findings of the Carlisle.
Right.
Okay, okay.
And then to include
Yeah.
construction
Yeah,
fence.
and also should recommendation, Kalo have to accept their presentation based on the findings of Carlisle.
Is that how he words it?
I don't know that you need to indicate that, I think you're
I
accepting.
think just this.
Yeah.
Okay, so just, okay.
And then if you feel compelled to also include some determination of the long-term stewardship, or just to explore
Yeah.
that opportunity, it sounds like the applicant is willing to explore the opportunity of who
Sure,
that
sure.
would like to donate it to. And we still have a final site plan to go on this, so.
It's not a very difficult task, is it, to find somebody to take over that wetland, is it?
I think Friends of the Rouge could probably find somebody, if not themselves.
That's what I
Ducks
was
Unlimited, there's a lot of people that are.
Friends of the Rouge,
Yeah.
okay. You're the guy for that.
So we're adding two things, right? Those two things, is that it?
Right,
Okay.
Yeah, the construction fence and long-term
and
storage.
explore an opportunity for long-term maintenance, yes.
Okay, let's start over. Make a motion to approve. Okay. The Kalo Wetland Permit 19-001, based on the findings in the Carlisle Workman Report dated June 11, 2019, with the condition that the applicant address on the final site plan and development agreement the following: construction fence, explore long-term stewardship of the wetland, and that's it, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and based upon the findings of Carlisle Workman.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, it
Yeah.
right here.
Yep, right here.
It was here, I read this.
Oh, yeah, you
Same,
did.
same.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. It was a little messy.
Okay, so it's-
Okay.
Second.
Madam Chair, could you read the full motion one more time?
I want you to read it again.
What is this?
Carlisle Workman.
Motion to approve Kalo Wetland Permit 19-001, based on the findings in the Carlisle Workman Report dated June 11, 2019, with the condition that the applicant address the final site plan and development agreement, including construction fence, long-term stewardship, or conservancy of the wetland.
Second.
Yeah, so that's it. Good? Now, we got all the professionals to nod their heads, so we need to vote.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Any
Anybody
discussion?
have any questions?
Okay. Mark Hahn.
Yes.
Darrell Lewandowski. Yes. TJ McLaughlin.
Yes.
Pam Malone.
Yes.
Bruce Reed. Yes. Robert Rizzo.
Yes.
Dan McGarry.
Yes.
Okay. Now on to the, yep, this one's next. Now we'll move on to the 8B, Kalo preliminary site plan 18-004. Paul, we'll start with you for overview.
Okay, so this is the second time this has been in front of you. At the last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion. I'll just briefly go through. I think I covered much of what the proposal is for already in my previous report, so I'll kind of just go over the outstanding items that we had here. And then we can reference the applicant has provided a response letter dated June 7th, which should also be in your packets to indicate how they would address each of these items. If you recall, obviously one of the biggest issues here is the noise generated from this site, especially after hours noises. The applicant has placed a narrative on the front cover sheet of the preliminary site plan, which ultimately, if the site plan is approved, that site plan will be the governing document for the development and the long-term use of the site. So there was some concern that those hours of operation didn't go far enough, and that the indication of what they were going to do with after-hours dumping, which creates quite a bit of noise, is not addressed enough. So in their response letter, they indicate that on the final site plan, they will also provide some notation that tailgate banging would be prohibited after 7 p.m. Concrete disposable after 7 p.m. would only happen in an approved designated location on the site, which they will indicate on that final site plan. And they will have signs directing any trucks that come in after hours to that designated location. They also provided an assessment from their natural resource management company who submitted the initial assessment on dust and noise, because some of the things have changed with regard to the location of the concrete crusher itself from the initial proposal. They updated that in a memo that was also included in that response letter, indicating that the sound from that would not be greater than normal acceptable levels. As we've discussed before, obviously, normal acceptable levels are fine, except that in the middle of the night, sometimes those loud noises from the banging or the dumping of concrete can actually be quite disturbing. And so that's why they provided the indication of the additional standards that they would place. Our second comment had to do with wetlands. Obviously, we've dealt with that this evening. We talked about landscaping around the detention pond. They indicate that because that is now a dry basin, the requirements in the zoning ordinance were to have that shaded. That was what was missing in our report. The necessity to shade that pond is no longer there because it's a dry pond, not a wetland. So there's some discussion about the screening along 6 Mile Road. They put this berm and screening in during the previous site plan review and approval from the township. So they're suggesting that those trees that are there continue to grow. You've all probably been down 6 Mile and looked at that, and those existing trees are starting to fill in. And then so immediately behind that then is the concrete pile. And so there's a suggestion that provides additional buffer and screening both for noise and visibility, so that's something that you as the planning commission should make a determination if you find that to be acceptable. And then our last comment has to do with lighting, and certainly lighting can be addressed on the final site plan. And I think their comment to that the new lighting is being proposed as part of the new parking and will be indicated on the final site plan. There was also a report from the engineers. They had a couple of outstanding issues, one of which has to do with the depth of gravel proposed in the parking area. But I've had conversations with the township engineer today, and they feel confident that all of the outstanding items, and it's indicated that way in the report, that these things can also be addressed on the final site plan. So ultimately what you're doing in the preliminary is accepting the general layout. There are more details that come along with the final. I think the biggest hurdle here was obviously the wetland issue, which you have just reviewed and approved. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the particular layout of the site or any other details that you might want to discuss.
I guess I could address this to Kalo. The number of vehicles using this facility, Kalo trucks versus non-Kalo trucks, what are those numbers?
We want to, maybe we should go to Mr. Kalo's representatives and let them do their overview next. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
they'll answer.
So will you be addressing that question, the number of trucks?
They might be able to answer some of the things.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Do it during the presentation.
My name's Bill Dunnan. I'm with RP Dunnan, Mr. Kalo's engineer that prepared this site plan. As far as your question about trucks, I think Mr. Kalo is about the only one that can answer that. I don't know what the status of the trucks are.
Did you want to know percentages? Is that what you were asking?
I was just wondering if you had numbers. Percentage doesn't really give us an accurate idea of how many trucks are using the facility. And I'm doing it in relation to also is the issue of the hydraulic tail lift or tailgate lift or whatever, because I don't anticipate the non-Kalo trucks will accommodate that. You may be able to accommodate that, but you can't really force them to accommodate.
I would say outside dumping is about 5%, 5 to 10%.
Oh, okay.
So it's relatively low compared to our truck.
Okay. That answers my question.
Okay.
Did you want to do an overview of the presentation? Or respond to some of the questions, or just do a brief overview for people?
Yeah.
Or if not, we can move on.
As far as responding to his comments, I think that we pretty much agreed to everything that he's stated on there, and it's all accurate. So, we have no problem with it.
So that, just to clarify, the hours dumping should be indicated on the plan, which I believe they are.
The hours are indicated on the plan.
Did it, and I think in your response, there's just so much information, sorry if I'm asking something, it's a repeat. But it's going to be, after hours would be the back portion of the property, correct? Okay, does that need to be on the plan, the location, or?
It'll be on the plan.
If that would be on the
That's
plan.
what the back is.
Mr. Kalo can probably show us some, or Mr. Doran on his map.
Which one are we looking at? It'd be back in this area someplace.
Okay, I can't see it.
It'd be
Southwest.
the furthest corner from the 6 Mile and all the further away from the school and, away from the junk road, it would be back in this area.
So I don't know that we're necessarily agreeing to any particular location tonight. I think you'll evaluate it in the final site
A lot of
plan.
things were in the
Generally
plan.
that
Okay.
I just need to know if I need to speak in the next public comment, that's all.
Okay.
I had a question about on the front page of the plan, under the noise section, it says that concrete stockpiles and crushed material piles will be located between the residential area and the crusher, reducing noise levels. And then right underneath that, the visual, it says broken concrete stockpiles moved away from 6 Mile Road to its new location on the southwestern part of the site, which we just said. And then one of these many pages, it might be Mr. Donovan's, you are planning to move, I guess which one is it? The stockpiles, are they staying there or are they moving?
The
It's just not clear.
stockpiles are staying there.
The stockpile, the broken concrete stockpile is up in this area, and that's where it's going to stay. Because of the proximity of the well and all the truck scale, and then the new wheel wash is going to go down here, so it can't move south, maybe a few feet, but that's about it. So that's where it's going to stay. That's where it is now.
Okay. What percentage would you say your trucks have the hydraulic lift gates? Air gates?
Well, it's only, the only concern is on the steel trucks, because the aluminum trucks are out of the equation, they don't haul any concrete.
Okay.
So the percentage of the steel trucks are, as of now, it's 100%. Our last 2 sets that didn't have them, they're for sale, so.
Okay. trucks do you have?
There is 50?
50 are yours? And would you say about 5% are, that go in there and dump?
5%, 5 to 10%.
Anyone else have any questions?
I did. So you mentioned that your aluminum trucks do not haul concrete. Are they doing any dumping after hours though? So what would be causing the?
Just the concrete trucks.
Just concrete trucks. So all the other stuff is normal business hours, which you indicate.
Yes.
And the other thing is I did see, and I can't tell you exactly where it's at, but the slight discrepancy in the work hours, particularly on Saturday. Print says 7 to 1, and somewhere else I read 7 to 7, or 6 days a week, 7 to 7.
7 to 1 is the concrete crushing operations, recycling operation. And then 7 to 7 was the normal, or 5 to 7, I think is what it was. 5 to 7 is the normal trucking operations.
Okay.
It's up to you, go ahead.
I was just going to cover a couple of things. Resident Sherry talked about Murph District and what public interest this has. Well, some of the public interest is we're increasing the wetlands, upgrading that, getting 1.5 times what we have now. But also, the electric crusher, there'll be no diesel emissions, less noise. Of course, replacing the lift gates with airless, but you said that's on your trucks, that's 100% done. And then the other thing was with that Murph. I mean, I don't know if people realize that the material that you get in is recycled. He gets re-rod that comes in with his concrete.
Still not a Murph.
And that's metal. And that metal is sold to a scrapyard, which in turn is sold to a mill. Like, can I speak?
No.
Please don't interrupt.
Yeah. It's
Well,
sold.
I'm sorry, he's talking to me like I'm a 5-year-old. No, it does upset me a little bit.
Well, I'm explaining that it gets re-rod. A lot of people don't know that.
I can see it.
It gets sold to a scrapyard, which then goes to a mill, which then is melted for new metal. Okay? He gets concrete, excuse me, that's crushed and is made into, I don't know, 21 AA that is used to help us on all our roadways for base, also for private residences. So there are materials that are being recycled.
Asphalt as well.
Asphalt as well. And as far as the dust, the wheel scrubbers will help with the wheels, because I've been out there in Chubb Road, and I've seen all the mud that the wheels come out. I mean, it's just what happens. But with those wheel scrubbers, that should solve that problem. Because from the wheel scrubber to Chubb Road is all asphalt, so they're not gonna run into dirt again. In your process, though, there will always be some dust. I mean, you have piles of sand, you have piles of topsoil, but that is a permitted use. That is part of the process. I see even with your concrete stacked, there is some dirt in between the concrete. When trucks dump loads, there's going to be some dust. And I also notice when you have your front end loader, when you're dumping into a pup trailer, you do see some dust that comes up. But that is part of the process. You're going to have some dust. I just wanted to make that kind of clear, that there is going to be some dust. You can do as much as you can to control it. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you've got DEQ approval for your whole process.
Yes.
All the way from front to end, you know. So, and that's all documented in the materials that we have here.
Everything's correct.
That's right.
You have 150 employees.
Yes.
You see that about half of them live within 5 to 10 miles
Yes.
of your facility. And I think that came up in our last meeting we were, I don't know if it came up too.
I'm one of them.
Oh, it was you? Okay. So we're gonna, it is tight in there, I've been in there a couple of times. How big is the wheel washer?
Bill, you get those dimensions?
Yes. Up here.
Thanks.
The wheel wash itself is 60 feet long, and it's associated within our recovery pits. Wheel washer is right there. We have water recovery pits, settling ponds, so the water is reused. There's a ramp here to come down, pick up the debris, and dispose of it. This is all asphalt on this side. The trucks go through the wheel wash. They come out to Chubb Road on asphalt all the way. If they're going across the scale, again, it's still asphalt. So the wheel wash itself is 60 feet long.
I did notice that one of the notes showed that the piles could be as high of storage 85 feet. And I think there's a 50-foot limit.
I don't know where that 85 feet came
I
in.
read it somewhere, but I also read that predominantly you keep it at 50 feet, so I just wanted to make sure that that is...
Yeah, we're constantly checking, we're always below 50.
Okay.
Yeah, has the 5 AM to 7 PM, was that from the approval years ago
Yes.
of hours of operation? And then right after the hours of operation, it talks about additional operations outside of hours. So I don't quite understand that.
If
But-
they were, they had to use Chubb Road to 5 Mile.
It seems like it's extended hours of operation, but, so after the hours of 7 PM, is it only your trucks going in?
After 7 PM, yeah, it would be, the operations as far as trucking on site would stop. So if I'm working on the highways or something and my trucks are going to and from the yard, and I gotta, we're working nights on bridges or whatever, if we're leaving, we have to go out Chubb Road at 5 Mile. It's only a one-trip deal, one back and forth.
But there's not other trucks, not yours, coming in 9 PM, dumping their
No.
loads, banging their lift gates?
Never.
Okay.
Might be just clerical, but it says on here about that going out 5 Mile east or west. Is it west? No trucks? Once you get 5 Mile? Or you can only go a little bit and...
You don't have a sign at Curtis Road, so they can come in that way. It says no through truck, for business only, at Salem Road. On this side of Salem.
The last statement in that paragraph, neither concrete crushing nor trucking operations shall occur on Sunday. Is there anything that will occur on Sunday?
Just cleaning and maintenance, but nothing that's creates any noise.
We should state something like make it inclusive, I guess.
And I don't think we've ever had
I
a
mean,
complaint on a Sunday because we don't work, so it's just cleaning and maintenance.
How often would you say, I mean, I know when you can't predict the future and all this, but in the past, how often have you been beyond the 7 PM? Once a month, a couple times a year? Just to give us an idea.
As far as trucks coming in the yard from working somewhere else,
For the dumping and stuff.
the dumping and stuff, I maybe once a week, twice a week, a truck will come in, you know, past 7 o'clock.
Yeah, go ahead.
As part of the normal flow of concrete to be crushed, does it usually come right off the truck and go right into the crusher, or does it typically get stockpiled someplace?
It's usually dumped and then thrown right into the crusher, other than the stockpile we have.
Or pushed in or
It
something.
goes in and out, you know, sometimes it fluctuates.
Okay, but this southwestern corner you're talking about, down, is it here? Yeah, down in this corner, material, that's just a place that a truck can come in instead of putting into the crusher, instead
If
of
it's
clogging it
after
around
7,
the
if there's
crusher.
1 or 2 trucks that show up past 7, they'll have signs saying,
Yeah.
you know,
Dump it
go to the
here
other end of the
because you're not
property.
crushing it, and that's just a place for
Nobody
it.
here sitting there.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, quick question now. If you're working on a nighttime project, which there's a lot of that going on, the trucks then will come into your yard to dump concrete, is that correct?
No, the nighttime projects, we don't dump in our yard.
Okay, you go to a different yard?
We're just working out on the highway, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll go to a different yard?
Different yard, that day,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
What did we have? Everything was answered, right? Well, everything was answered, just the engineers put everything,
So many items were deferred to the final site plan,
Right.
but we agree that those items will not change the basic layout, so we find that that would be acceptable if you think the general layout and the proposal is
so we
acceptable.
didn't miss anything. No, there's nothing that's outstanding, so just putting in everything.
I'd like to make the motion to approve Kalo preliminary site plan 18-004 with the condition that the applicant address all outstanding items from the Township Planner's Report dated May 13, 2019, and the Township Engineer's Report dated May 10, 2019, in the final site plan, as well as any items discussed at tonight's meeting. Which I think everything was, there were no really outstanding.
I second.
Any additional questions, discussion?
Roll call vote.
Yes, please.
Art Khan.
Yes.
Darrell Lewandowski.
Yes.
TJ McLaughlin.
Yes.
Pam Willow.
Yes.
Bruce Reed, yes. Robert Rizzo.
Yes.
And Dan Gary.
Yes.
Okay, number 9. Approval of the minutes for May 20th, 2019.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of May 20th, 2019 as submitted.
Second motion.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of May 20th, 2019, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Reports and correspondence. PJ? Nothing. CDA?
Nothing.
Land preservation?
Nothing at this time.
Planning consultant?
I have nothing further this evening.
Public comment?
What is there left to say?
Madam Chair, I have been to 2 planning commission meetings in basically the last 20 years. I've been to an awful lot of municipal meetings, about twice a month. And the last time I was here, I was appalled by the behavior of Commissioner Vergari when he argued on behalf of the applicant to the residents in the audience, because it is not the job of a planning commissioner to advocate for somebody petitioning this board. I'm even more appalled tonight at the behavior of Mr. Rizzo, because it is not his job to advocate for anybody, for me or for an applicant. When you're sitting at that table up there, you are supposed to be neutral, you're supposed to listen, you're supposed to do your job. And to argue with what somebody says from the audience is totally 100% unprofessional behavior. I spoke to Mr. Whitaker before about Mr. Vergari. He did give me the option to meet with you, and I was not able to do that. I will speak to Mr. Whitaker again about you, because that was just appalling behavior. So, the other thing I wanted to mention. Care to say that to my face?
Sure.
Keep rolling.
The other thing that I want to mention is there is a feeling of people here that this planning commission doesn't really care that much about the residents that are around. I know I've talked to Mr. Whitaker multiple times about this operation. Quite frankly, I don't care if they're doing business there. I really don't care what they do there. I care if their business impacts the enjoyment of my property. And maybe it's something that hasn't been explained, and maybe I haven't explained it correctly, but there's the people that live on Salem Road, there is some sort of noise displacement that goes on from that development. It hits the school, it bounces back, and it bounces over. I can hear things on the second floor of my house that I can't hear on the first floor with my fan running. So maybe there's just a mitigation that can be done, and that's why I asked what the backside of that property was, because the backside of that property is behind the school. So if they're going to do activities back there that are going to reverberate into that school and bounce over again, I mean, I feel bad for children in that school when those things bang, because you can feel it when you're behind the school, when that stuff happens. So maybe there needs to be some concern about that. I mean, these are legitimate concerns, and I realize that there's been some adversarial relationships between some of the people in this room and some of the people up there. I'm not that kind of person. That's not the way I do business. I think there are solutions. Everything has to be listened to. And that's all I need to say.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes, I agree with what you said about Mr. Rizzo's comments. He certainly did seem like he was advocating more for the developer. And maybe when his job ends here on the planning commission, maybe he's looking for a job with Caleb. I'm sure they would hire you, sir.
Oh, man, come on.
That's
Wait,
not
let's
You
stop
did a
that
great
shit.
job. You did a
You
great
have to
job.
stop that shit.
Point of
Wait.
order.
That's my friend up there. Don't
You're
talk
out of
about
line,
him.
sir.
He's not advocating for
Let's
anybody.
stick-
Let's stick to the comment,
bullshit.
please.
You're out of line.
Let's stick to
Put
the
him on
comment.
yourself. Wait.
This is my public
Stop
comment.
down.
I'm speaking now.
No,
sir.
you're not.
It's your turn. You can
Stop.
speak, sir.
No, that
stop.
bullshit's done, Wayne.
You stop.
That's done,
You know
man.
what? Stop right now. Everybody, if you can't follow the rules, get out, okay? That goes for everybody.
I had the floor.
Wait until I'm done, and I'm going to give it back to you. I'm doing this on your behalf. Please, let's show some respect. Mr. Walsey, if you have a comment to address the planning commission, please address us as a whole here and finish your time.
As I was addressing the planning commission. It was totally inappropriate of Mr. Rizzo, the way he addressed that issue. He is supposed to be neutral. And he certainly came off like he was advocating for Mr. Kalo. As for that being a permitted use, I suggest that Mr. Rizzo and the rest of the Planning Commission read our ordinances. There's nothing in this township that is a permitted use if it's detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Salem Township. I'm very disappointed in the fact that not one of these planning commissions, you talked about it, I touched on it a little bit, couldn't at least negotiate a little bit better hours of operation to benefit the residents. I'm sure if any member of this planning commission lived in proximity of this, they would have certainly considered negotiating hours. That was your perfect opportunity. They basically walked into this room and got everything they wanted today, and the residents got nothing. You talked about it. You were very disappointing, each and every one of you tonight. You could have at least tried, and you didn't try at all. Disappointing. Thank you very much.
What's the matter? What? Where's
Anthony,
your proof? Where's your proof?
You heard what I had to
Where's
say,
your
sir.
proof? Do you have documentational proof of anything, of noise or
Noise
dust or
every day.
anything?
Guys,
Do you have, where's your proof?
You come over to my
Where's
yard
your
tomorrow and
decibels?
have a cup of coffee with me.
Okay, we have our proof. We have our
No,
stuff.
it's my turn to talk now. If you would like to do your comment, you can raise your hand and I'll recognize
sorry, babe.
that goes for absolutely everyone. And I
We
will
live
give-
in this
I will-
community, sir.
Mr.
We
Walsh,
live in
you're
this
over.
community.
You're done. Please, stop.
Thank you.
Just Mr. Fleming is right. Go ahead, sir.
To speak to what this gentleman,
Mentioned anything about the creek? They're not gonna change the water, are they?
No, no, that's okay.
Because they gotta get the water down that creek.
You're talking about,
All this water goes down.
yeah, that's the one, we're going, yep. We're all set, we're gonna make it even better.
You know,
Somebody's gonna do better now.
because every home in here has got water in the basement. There's some pumps pumping out. You don't believe it, look out the window and you'll see it. Even this building. That water's gotta go down that creek, so if they're gonna do anything, make sure that that water stays, flows through.
Right? Yep, we're gonna do that. And I know this is heated, I get it. But we can't run a meeting the way we've done it in the past. We can't, we're not going to. So if I have to talk to one more person that I've already spoken to, I'm just gonna ask you to leave, okay? Okay. The gentleman in the back has something to say.
well, I was just gonna say, regarding this gentleman's comments about this guy up here advocating for us.
Your name, please?
Mark Jodwick, and I'm
Okay.
a resident of Whitmore Lake and an
Okay.
employee of Kalo.
Okay.
So what this gentleman was saying, all this guy was doing was merely relating facts. Facts from the DEQ. Other people who know more than this gentleman does. He was trying to instill the information in you that you weren't understanding. I didn't feel in any shape, way, or form this guy was on our team, a part of us. He is a messenger. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, he doesn't even know Tony.
Okay, Rich, hold on,
No,
hold on.
we're good, but he doesn't even know Tony, so he's not gonna advocate for him.
Rich, strike two. Yes, sir.
So my name's David. I live on 7800 Chubb. Appreciate your comments. It really helps simplify everything in it. But I don't know what discussions have been made about the issue of concrete chunks being on the roads. I'm constantly removing concrete from the roads, primarily 6 Mile and 5 Mile and on Chubb all the time. And I don't, like I said, I don't know what discussion or what has been brought up about this, but if there's an issue that's directly affecting or an issue to the community, it's that is we can't identify explicitly that it's coming from him, but it's all around his business, and something needs to be done. I know it becomes a lawful issue when it becomes a threat to people in the community, but we could take a walk down 6 Mile, 5 Mile right now and find massive chunks of concrete on the road that are an imminent threat to every person driving. I've seen cars hit concrete trucks and get flat tires immediately. And it was a pizza guy. He was delivering pizza. It was just a young guy. He hit a piece of concrete right in the middle of the road. And I had to I'm always removing concrete, so is there any knowledge about or any discussion that's been going on about that at all?
Okay. We'll go on to, are you?
No, I need a
Okay.
response.
I'll do my, when it's my turn, so I just went through this whole big deal, everybody's got their turn, my turn's at the end, so. We'll address it, and then maybe you can talk to Mr. Kalo
So
afterwards.
this isn't really, I wasn't sure if this was
Right,
really.
or you can always,
Is that
call a
something you
complaint
address
to the Salem, to the township, you can call if there are some complaints
That's
there.
nothing you guys address here, or something that should be brought to your attention that you.
Any information is always good that's brought to our attention, yes, it helps us put the whole big picture together.
Okay.
So, thank you, no, that's good to know.
I'll respond to that.
Did somebody else have their hand up first? No? Okay, Mr. Kalo.
Yeah, you know, it does happen where a piece of concrete will get stuck sometimes in between your duals. And, you know, we put safety checks for our drivers to make sure that they constantly check their tires, that there's nothing wedged in between the two pieces of rubber that once you get going fast, it plops out, flies out. I think it was about a month and a half ago, Gary Whitaker called me up upset saying that right at the corner of 6 Mile and Chubb, there was a bunch of broken sidewalk, a bunch of pieces that went out on the 6 Mile. You know, and somebody had called one of the neighbors screaming and saying that it was Kalo. And I went out there and it wasn't us. It was somebody that was coming from 7 Mile to 6 Mile on Chubb, which we're never on 7 to 6, or Chubb Road between 7 and 6. And they were making a right onto 6 Mile going westbound, heading through town here. And they spilled maybe 4 or 5 yards out onto 6 Mile. It was probably one of the chocolate covered wagons, you know, a guy in a pickup with, I don't even know why he was going that way with the concrete anyway, when my yard's right there. But he was going through town, and we went out there and cleaned up the mess. But again, everybody was blaming us for it, and it had nothing to do with us.
Okay.
And then you've got trash trucks that are coming down, losing their trash, losing the concrete, they're dropping it too. I'm not saying that, it doesn't happen to us, but there's a lot of other people that are dropping things, and we're there to clean it up and sweep it up for everybody.
Mr. Horton?
I'm Robert Horton, 4235 Shoreview in Whitmore Lake. I also own down on Salem Road, and I also own on Chubb. Mr. Rizzo is well qualified for his comment because he's in the recycling business. So he would have more knowledge than most of the people around here, especially of fuel. He has all types of knowledge, scrap, metal, and all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Okay. Now, chairperson comment. My turn. We did better in this meeting. I do want to say that that there have been, in speaking with Mr. Whitaker, who gives out his phone number to everyone when they have complaints and issues, Township is who you call. And he said he has been out a couple of times, a number of times. I don't know, he didn't say exactly, but he said he's been out a few times where people were complaining about the noise at night, and it wasn't Kalo. We have a heavy industrial area there. That's what they do. Mr. Kalo does not have to abide by these restrictions. He has volunteered to help out. We know it's costing him money. I think it was like, what, $280,000 for the mitigation plan. He's got the sweeper. I think he's trying to help and work with the community. To be honest, it just stinks that it's right there next to town. But we're established in what, 18 something, the sign I see 100 times every time I come through here. And that's where it is. I wish I could move it. What other ones do we have here? And as far as the way people were taking offense to Mr. Rizzo, I don't think he was advocating, but because that's his business, I'm married to a contractor that when I tell my girls to do something, they're like, yeah, whatever. When their dad says something and he says it like this, because that's the way he talks, you know, daddy's screaming at me or something like that. So I didn't take his tone of voice being any different than the way he talks to me, so I can't speak for you, but I'm sure I didn't think that he planned it that way, but I can see how he that's his business, that's what he knows. He was trying to help and explain and clarify, and the more information we can get out and share with each other and help try and get everyone on the same page or similar or even close, it can just be helpful. So those are my comments. We adjourned at 9:14.
Our horse and pony show.
I got to know that's the saddest part. Watch the video and says, you didn't give a